Okay, we'll go ahead and get started since we only have 30 minutes. Welcome to those who are joining us tonight for the panel discussion for the FLL Judges Basic Info. I will pass it on to Dave Barron and let each of our panels presenters share who they are and what their affiliation is with First Legal League Judging. Dave?
Thanks, Dana. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dave Barron. I am the head judge advisor of the Maryland region. I've been doing that job for the past 9 seasons. I've been judging FLL for about 14 years at this point. I'd say I'd probably covered 70-ish events over those past 14 years, everything from our smaller regional qualifiers all the way up to being a judge at World Festival.
Scott?
Hi, I'm Scott Rigshaw. I'm the head judge advisor for the Virginia DC region. I've been in that role for the last 5 years, and part of that was a very active volunteer and coached 8 teams, including taking a team to Worlds and other different international invitations.
Okay, great. And Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe Cunningham. I'm a judge advisor in Maryland. I've been a coach for 7 years now. I've judged for 5 years, and I've been a judge advisor for 3. I've taken a team to Worlds and to other international events, as well as I've refereed at World Festival.
Right. And Dawei? Yeah,
I'm Dawei Lin. And first, I want to thanks on behalf of Alma Robotics to all the judge advisors and Dana to participate in this panel and to share the judging experience. And myself, I have 7 years of coaching and mentoring FLL teams and judge at all the sessions, the core value project and robots, and looking forward to share my experience with you.
Okay, we'll get started.
Heather, do you want to review the logistics to people? Just give them some orientation in case this is their first experience with the first online.
Yes, hello. I'm Heather. I'll just quickly go over how the panel will work. So I posted in the Zoom chat room a Slido link, which will be the website for all the audience members to ask any questions you may like for the panelists. And I will present all the questions on the shared screen, and the judges will go over all the questions. So please use the Slido link to ask any questions, and the Zoom chat room for any technical questions you have.
Okay, so maybe Heather, if you can start the poll to see what does the audience look like today.
It looks like there's 20 audience members, but only 5 people have logged into Slido so far.
Yeah, I think some people may not familiar with the tool, so give a little time. It's interesting that we have some students in the audience.
anyone's looking on how to take the poll, if you click on the chat, the links will come up on the side.
Okay, so maybe the next poll.
Okay. Looks like the majority are new to judging. We still only have 8, 10. That's about what we had on the other poll too, was 10 participants.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I mean, it looks like most of our participants tonight are new to judging. So are we going to start with Joe's presentation? Yes. Kind of do our intro.
Yep, that sounds a good idea.
Well, welcome everybody. This is a quick overview on explaining first LEGO League, what it is, how the judging is created, and just to give everybody a nice even baseline. Next slide. What is First LEGO League? First LEGO League is a way of creative, innovative solutions for challenging today's scientists to build an autonomous robot using LEGO. They're to apply real-world solutions to real-world problems, to develop career and lifestyle skills. I mean, it is amazing the career and lifestyle skills these kids come up with, starting with 4th graders through 8th graders. The fact that they can go into a room and have an engineering design review and to defend their research and problem question is amazing. How these kids can develop that adults I've seen that have had trouble with these things. So the amount of life skills that they're developing, and they don't even know they're developing because it's just fun. Also, it really gets them involved in their local and global communities. We have one of the goals of First LEGO League is to get people out and to talking to experts, and it's amazing, these kids and the people that we've talked to over the years. Next slide. LEGO League is divided into 3 areas: core values, project, and robot design are the judging areas, and then there's the robot game. I'll go through each one of them really quickly. Core values judging is a 10-minute session. Teams participate in a challenge that they don't know ahead of time. The judges, what they're looking for is how the team works as a team, how it addresses a problem, and how it comes up with a solution to fix the problem. And are they utilizing the core values during that entire process? So basically 3 minutes to do the challenge and 7 minutes for questions. It's not designed to see if the kids can actually do the challenge or not. It's how does the team come together, address the problem, and move forward. And there's no right answer, but we're looking to see, are they collaborative? Is one person in charge? Are people backing away into the wall, or are they all engaged and everybody's input is valued? Next slide. Again, the task is so that the judges can observe them as they work through their activity. Completing it is not important. The question and answers are designed straight off the rubric to judge the team's understanding and practice of core values. Next slide. Innovative project is a little bit more straightforward. All of these judging sessions are 10 minutes, but in project it's 5 minutes. The team has looked at a real world problem and they have developed an innovative solution, and they have 5 minutes to get all their information across that they can. Within the last 5 minutes are judges Q&As to ask those questions that they didn't quite get from the presentation. So next slide. As I said, the project: identify a real world problem, create a solution, and who did they share their research and their solution with. The solution doesn't need to be technology based. Even though this is a robotics competition, a robot doesn't have to be part of the solution. They can come up with, as long as they've identified a real world problem within the rules of that season, and they come up with an innovative solution that solves the problem that they've identified and that they've shared their research. That's the 3 key points to the project. Next slide. Robot design is just a 10-minute Q&A about how well they designed their robot. And what we're getting to is the design process, the choices that they made. What was their final design? What was their engineering process? Did they design, test, evaluate, and then redesign, retest, reevaluate in that entire process, and how their choices evolved over time? What were their strategies? How did they do their programming? The same thing. What was their original programming? How did they test it? How did they refine it? How did they test it again? And that's what we're constantly trying to get the kids to figure out, that cycle. Their strategy on how they, because they have 2.5 minutes to do as many missions as they can. What was their strategy? How did they figure it out? And how did they apply their core values? And technical knowledge afterwards. What went into their robot design, what went into their programming, what went into their efficiency, and how about the process, and about how they came up with new and innovative ways of solving a problem with their robot. Next slide. Next slide. That might be the end. Yeah, so those are the 3 big areas. So Lego League, the judges are basically judging the teams based on a rubric, and I believe Heather has the rubrics on another set of slides, but it's the 3 areas: the core values, the innovative project, and the robot design. And that is what is the key to everything. It's not a secret thing that we do. We're evaluating every team. That's what the rubrics are for. They're not checklists, but the rubrics help us compare each team on a given set of criteria. And these are the criteria that we're using to judge the teams. It's not a check in the block, but it is kind of squishy, but I'll let my other panelists talk about it. But this is the reason for First Lego League, is judging on these 3 areas. And then how well that robot does on its own and how many points it gets is the 4th pillar to figuring out which teams are going to be successful. That's all I got.
Heather, maybe we can now display the Slido to see what the question out there.
So do we need a poster for core value judging?
So that's it's a regional decision. We have never used the core values posters in Maryland, in the Maryland region. So we actually do discourage those. Teams are welcome to carry them into the room if they so desire, but we don't use those as a formal metric for judging, for core values judging. And a little bit about the reasoning behind that is that in the 10 minutes that we get with the teams for core values judging, we really want to see how they work together as a team, how they interact with each other, how they support each other when they're asked a difficult question, all those things along those lines. And so I find it, from a judge perspective, it's really useful to keep them off script, so they get a feel for how they really work together as a team, as opposed to the seeing a presentation that they've rehearsed over a period of time.
Scott, do you want to speak for the Virginia DC?
So it's also optional for Virginia DC, mainly because we have a short season. And as Dave said, it's more important interaction that we have with the team and the Q&A. We kind of ask teams to kind of shy away from rehearsed and scripted things, except in project where they're doing their 5 minutes. But the judges in that 10-minute session, that core values room, are really trying to get to know the team. The core values poster can be a good prompt for teams so they kind of remember what they need to talk about. If you do prepare one and bring one in Virginia, we try to give you a less than a minute to kind of talk about it after you do your challenge, but that's not a guarantee. So it's a good prompt, but it's optional in Virginia DC also.
Yeah, I think in the past I've heard from some coaches that they choose to make a core values poster even though we don't really use it in Maryland, and for them it's just a way to have the students think about the topics that they want to speak to when they're in the room, and to help kind of use that as a way to help formulate their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And next question is, what are the judges looking for in core values, project, robot design sessions? That's a lot.
The rubrics.
Yeah, maybe I can. Yeah, I think that I agree with the other panelists. I think it's not about how cute the custom is, how energetic the kids are. I mean, that is, some of that are good for core values, but the real ranking is based on the rubrics.
What's that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. Like, to really get a feel for what we're looking for in the rooms, I would suggest you spend a little time reading the rubrics. I think a lot of the scoring criteria, FIRST has done a really good job over the past several years of refining some of the language on the rubrics, making it clearer to understand, to really help guide when we say what an exemplary team in a category looks like, what that really looks like. You can really pull that out from seeing it on the rubric itself. And I would say, I talked a little bit about the core values and the types of things we looked at. We look for in core values. The other piece of that is we usually use a teamwork activity for the teams to attempt. And as we always tell the teams, even when they're competing at our events, the purpose of the teamwork activity is not who accomplishes it the best. It's really just an opportunity for the judges to see the team in action and see how they really work together as a team. Which teams, one student does all of the building of the task or commanding of the problem that's being solved, where the other 4 or 5 students kind of stand there passively and watch. And which team, everybody has a contribution to make, and on the collaborative negative side, which team spends the 3 minutes they have for the teamwork activity trying to get everybody's voice included in the room, and to the point where they never actually make any progress towards starting the actual activity. Mm-hmm. For projects, I think, again, the rubrics are your guide. The thing I always tell coaches when they ask me about this, every year for project, there's 3 criteria that the teams have to meet. They have to identify a real world problem, based on whatever the theme for the season is. They have to come up with an innovative solution, and they have to share it with others. And the number one mistake I see teams make is that they forgot to talk about the sharing piece, because it doesn't naturally come through in the presentation. So typically my judges will ask a question about that in the 5 minutes they get for the presentation, after the presentation, to ask questions so they can understand how the teams did that. But that's probably the biggest pitfall we see for that. And then actually, I was going to turn it over to Joe to talk a little bit about the robot design piece.
Okay. On the project too.
Yep.
Another problem that I see is that their solution doesn't meet their problem that they identified. So they'll talk about some problem and then they'll talk about their solution. But generally how this goes is that solution has morphed over the course of the season. And then by the time they're getting ready to present it, they're solving a really good problem if they could identify what the problem was and not the original problem that they identified. So making sure that they identify a problem and that their solution actually is solving the problem that they identified. But I'll go back to robot design. As I said, robot design, the judges are really looking for 3 different areas. They're looking for mechanical design, they're looking for programming, and they're looking for strategy. And so mechanical design, does the robot stay together? Is the robot designed to accomplish the missions on the board? How does the robot know where it is in space and time? The programming, is the programming strong enough to be able to do what they want it to do? Is it a point and shoot, or are they using their sensors? Are they using other things other than sensors to figure out where it is and how to know it accomplishes the mission? And then strategy is, how did they divide the board up? How did they divide themselves up? How did they divide the work up? And how many missions are they accomplishing? Are they efficient? Are they doing 2 or 3 in one? Or are they doing just one out and back and out and back and out and back? Are they utilizing the fullest extent of the robot? I've seen a couple of teams that have had these really complex robots that obviously came from the internet, which is fine as long as they give credit where they got the design from. And then they use this really complex robot to do a point and shoot, just to push a thing of things into a circle and then come back. Where this thing has this thing that can do 16 things at the same time, but they only use it to go and do one mission where they could have done 6 at the same time. So the strategy and the innovation of their robot, did they utilize their robot to maximize the score? So those are the 3 areas in robot design that they really look for: mechanical design, programming, and then strategy.
So the next question, I believe, was answered by Dave. The question is, what stands out to judges the most? And Dave commented on really looking at teams that work well together, that they're all speaking, that it's not just one child taking over for the rest of the team. So he brought that up earlier, and I, having judged over years too, I feel that that is important. Is the team cohesive? Are they coming together? Would you all agree with that? And do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think that it's useful to think about this question from the context. We've already talked about the rubrics, and obviously, like, there's the criteria we're looking at. So, like, what are the softer skills that make some of the top teams stand out more? And I think that's definitely one of them. I would say enthusiasm often comes through. If it's obvious when the teams are proud of what they've accomplished and they can articulate that, and it shows through in the enthusiasm they show inside the judging room. I think some of that stands out to the judges often. Yeah.
No, I think I want to add, I think Dana alluded to it, sometime that the data disadvantage can stand out as well. Like if there's one talker dominate the team and it suddenly kind of probably ruin the presentation for the whole team. And I think that sometimes, that kind of event happen during the judging room as well.
Yeah, like was already said, enthusiasm. It's real easy for a judge to see those teams that are really wanting to be there. They're proud of what they're doing, and they're on point. And then there's those teams that are that aren't.
I think the other important thing too is it will often come out if the teams are doing the work versus seems to be there's a lot more support from coaches. We want teams to do all the work and not the coaches doing the work.
Yeah, and I think, Dana, this is one of the things that it will often reveal itself inside judging, especially at this age group. I always tell my judges in the morning when I'm doing judges training, The example I gave is several years ago, I was at a qualifier and asked the team, oh, who wrote the program that you guys just showed us? This was back when we had the robot design, the tables in the robot design rooms. So we said, oh, who wrote the program you guys just showed on the board? And then 8 fingers pointed to the coach who was standing in the side of the room with the camcorder. And so like those kinds of things come out sometimes when they happen, but I think the enthusiasm is really what makes the engagement and the pride that they've done the work come through.
Great. The next question I believe was answered to by Joe, but someone may want to add a little bit. What do judges want to see in robot design? Do complex designs get better scores than simple ones? Now, I don't know if they're talking about the robot itself or the programming. So who would like to take that?
For both,
that would be the assumption, but actually it's a design process that makes the difference. So you can have a very simple robot that is very stable and meets the criteria of the rubric, that's very consistent and can score very well, versus, sometimes you're doing complex line following and you see some of these more complex robots. So I don't think complex or designs actually do better than simple ones. I think it's all about the team and what the design process was and what their strategy and how they got to that design is what matters.
And it's a lot how the team presents it as well. If they said, our goal this year was to have a simple robot, we have this simple thing and we're able to do all these different missions with this same design, that lets the judges know that was their strategy going in and that's how they came out with it. If their strategy was we wanted to go out and we wanted to do 16 missions at the same time, then you're going to have this very complex program and robot that's doing those 16. But if that was their goal, then that's their goal. But if their goal was to have us, keep it simple, be able to do the same thing over and over again, then that's what the judges are going to base it on. So we're really listening to what the team is actually asking and saying that their plan was all along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I want to add that I think the question said that get a better score. I think that sometimes is misunderstood by the teams. And in the judging rooms, the rubrics is not a scoring system. It's help the judges to rank teams. So I think what the earlier panelists said is very interesting. Is can you tell a good story? Why do you want a complicated design? Why do you want a simple design? And if your story match up your strategy, and then you can have a higher ranking in the room, which is put your team into the top in terms of ranking for awards. So there is no real score. I think that's what I'm trying to explain.
Okay, the next. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was just going to add on to Dawei's point. I think that's really a good thing to point out too, that the rubric is the guide for the judges to make determinations on how the team did. But we don't look at it as if exemplary is 4 points, and I can never remember actual category names. And then developing is only 1 point. It's the weights equal across the 9 categories that the teams are evaluated in. But what really comes down to is the judges are making ranks based off of the quantitative data they've been able to collect as they see the teams. And I would expect that at the end of seeing 10 or 11 teams, my judging panel would come back, and yes, the team that was exemplary across the board is going to be higher up in that rank than the team that was beginning developing. But I wouldn't expect there to be like a one-to-one mapping where you could assign point values to the different categories and then see that reflected one-to-one in the actual rankings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is because, when you look at all of these criteria, it's kind of a continuum. So not every developing team is equal when they're rated as developing in that category. 2 teams that could be developing in a particular category, the one could still be clearly better for a reason that the judge was able to observe.
Okay, great. The next question is, what are rubrics? So the rubrics are at firstinspires.org, and maybe Heather, I don't know if you're able to go to First Inspires and find the link for the rubrics. Can you put them back up just real quickly so people can see it? And as she's doing that, or whoever's running that, it said, how accurate are the rubrics? That is what the judges use. And they, you get them, the teams have them ahead of time. The coaches should be sharing them with the teams. The teams should be using that to think about when they go to their judging sessions, but that's exactly what the judges are using. That one in particular is the robot design. There's one for core values. There's one for project too. So those are the 3 rubrics, and they are at firstinspires.org under First Legally. You can find it in the library. You can search rubrics, they are there.
Actually, Heather, if you keep display the rubrics, I think the one point I wanted to emphasize is that the rubrics is the guide for judging. And I think that over the years, I interact with the top teams, and this is what the things they follow, so that they can have the consistent performance over the years, because this, that they strictly follow what the rubrics going to check.
And there's a second part of the rubric as well. The rubric is what the judges use to evaluate the teams and to evaluate the teams against the other teams and to have a common set of criteria. But it's also the feedback to the teams. It's the one way that you as a judge really understand what the judges were looking for. You as a coach understands what the judges are looking at. And so every rubric, as you can see at the bottom, they'll talk about a positive, which is a great job, and a things to work on part. And so that's designed for that feedback. And so as a good coach, you should take this, and for your next competition, whether it's the next year or if it's in just a few weeks, if you're moving on, is to take that critique inside. If you got really low on one of those marks, take a look at what is it actually asking, and how can you ensure that your team is able to demonstrate that ability.
Can you hold it right there, Heather? That's the project one, and if you will note that there are 3 things required for an award consideration. The teams do have to identify the problem during their time with the judges. They have to tell what their solution is, and they have to tell the sharing, which Dave talked about earlier. If they don't say how they share their information, what they've learned, what they plan on doing, then they are not eligible for that award.
Another point actually that Joe reminded me of as he was talking about the rubrics just a second ago there is that I think, and Joe's probably lived this, is being both a coach and a judge. It's sometimes easy as a coach for you to mentally fill in the blanks for things that maybe the team didn't present super clearly inside the judging room. So I always remind my coaches, really, take a look at that rubric and look at it from the lens of, you were evaluating that solely based on the 10 minutes that the team got in the room. And even if you were, you had, 6 different sources of information in project, did anybody actually say that in the presentation? Or is that just something as a coach because that you spent the past 3 months with the team working with them on the project? It becomes really easy, I think, to just make that mental connection and miss that it didn't come through in the presentation sometimes. And if you didn't, there was a question I think earlier about supplemental materials, and if it doesn't happen in the 10 minutes in the judging room, it's probably not going to come through. If you to pick on sources of information again. If you walk in the project room with a binder that has, 200 pages of research that you've done, but you don't speak to that in your 5-minute presentation or answer a question about it in the room. The judges often see a team every 15, maybe if I'm feeling nice that day, they get to see a team every 20 minutes. But usually it's every 15 minutes. So they only get 5 minutes before the next team comes in the door. So they don't have the opportunity to actually review that supplemental material beyond when the team is in the room.
Right. The only supplemental material that judges actually have time to read is your team info sheet, and they're really looking at, oh, that was the team with the yellow t-shirts. Not that, I mean, that's about as far as they're going, because they're writing the notes down as you're talking, because they have to evaluate you on what you did during the room. You cannot come in later and say, oh yeah, by the way, we shared it with these 3 professionals. It doesn't count if it doesn't happen within those 10-minute interview.
Yeah, I think I want to add to that. I think the flyers and brochure are very helpful, because if you judging 8 teams and about like 4 or 5 teams, and then you kind of blur like what the teams are talking about what, and those brochures and flyers, it will help the deliberation, and also that I think the process, I think is that the different judges will in different rooms, and they'll come back together and to talk about the ranking they from 2 rooms which the judges did not see, and so those materials will help the judges in the particular room make a point for the team they're judging. So like if they have additional materials, and it'll be easier for the judges from other rooms to understand what they're talking about.
Okay, the next question I'll read. I'm not 100% sure what, I think we've already answered it. Let's put it that way. Robot design and brought annotations as board, not provided in judging room. Robot design judges not present at practices, so how is rubric actually scored?
Yes, I think this is trying to get after the change that we made in both Virginia and Maryland this year. We piloted the doing robot design without the tables in the rooms, which I anticipate will be a permanent change based on the success we had with that at both events, both regions last year, and then also I did have the opportunity when I judged at Worlds last year to judge it that way as well. So I think what we're really trying to get after here is that robot design judging is really trying to dig into the design process. So how did the team decide which missions they were going to try to attempt? How did the team decide how they were going to attempt those missions? How did the team decide which attachments to build? How many attachments did they build? I always tell the teams, bring every attachment you ever constructed with you to the robot design judging, whether you're planning to use it that afternoon or not, because we really want to hear the story of the trial and error that's happened, and how that engineering design process, what that looked like, and how the teams implemented things, tested things, designed things, all those kinds of things, all those kinds of items in the design room, as opposed to robot performance, which is evaluated independently in the afternoon, which is purely a score-based procedure where you're just looking to see how many points you can score on the board.
Yeah. So, and also talking about, I see the next question is very similar in the same way about how can you evaluate consistency? Well, we're not asking you, even when we had the tables, we wouldn't ask you to run the same mission 6 times to see if it was consistent or not. And so it was random whether it was going to work or not that moment. What I want to ask when I ask as a judge, and I'm trying to fill out that part of the rubric, is I ask the team, what did you do to make your robot more consistent? How, what did you program into the mission, or what did you design as a mechanical way that that you're going to hit that same thing every single time? If it's, well, we line up at the exact same spot and it goes forward 3 rotations and it always hits the same spot. Okay, that's your progress. If it's we go forward and then one of the sensors sees something and then we know we're hitting it at the same time, or we go until we hit the thing and then we put it in. And so I just want to know how, consistency is a problem. How did you as a team identify what was your problem with consistency and how did you overcome it? That's what we're trying to get to at Robot Design, not watching the robot. Because when we used to have the tables, no matter how much we were asking, and we would divide the team up, one team member was talking to the programming guy one time and the rest of them. But as soon as they hit go on that robot and the robot started doing its little 2-minute thing, everybody stopped and watched the robot because it's really neat to watch the robot go around. And we weren't asking questions, and we would lose a lot of Q&A time watching the robot. And the tables were always bad in the robot design room, so it didn't work, and that would frustrate the team, and the team would put it back together, and they would try 6 times to try to get the thing to work. And then they would have reasons why it wasn't working, and that's what we were trying to get away from. We're not judging whether you're going to do that point mission. We're judging your process.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we encountered a lot in the robot design rooms in the past when we had the tables in there is that, and I think this is useful for coaches to think about as well. Some of my robot design judges are expert FLL experienced coaches who maybe even have been competing that season. And some of my robot design judges are experts because they come back every year. And even though the game is new, they've been doing robot design judging for years. And some of my robot design judges are brand new, and all my other judges as well are brand new to robot design judging, and they've never done it before. And they've never looked at the game before the day that they come in to be a judge, to volunteer as a judge at your qualifier or your state championship event. And so the outcome of that is that when we see a lot in the robot design rooms is that if there was sometimes a model that was misplaced or just slightly misoriented, my judges were never going to catch that because they don't have the experience with the game.
Dave and Scott, as head judges, when you have judges that are new, you typically put them with an experienced judge, right?
When we can.
When you can.
And there's lots of training and so forth provided. And as Dave said, we're fortunate at most tournaments to have experienced judges who come back every year. But as people age out or people change lives, we're always refreshing. And there's lots of training materials that we do. So you're typically have an experienced judge who they're kind of mentoring a new judge and come along. Or, the best judges are people who've actually participated and done FLL because they have experienced it and know what the team is going through and what the team came up with.
And just for those who are newer to the program, our head judges do a really great job of training all the people, but they are all volunteers.
Yeah.
And there are people giving up their Saturdays to come and support these programs. They're not paid, they're doing it because they want to help. So we want to keep that in mind when you get your rubrics, that we're working with volunteers, and some of them are learning as they go, and they're really doing the best they can, but they can't express enough. They're volunteers.
And I will say that judging is the best coaches training you will ever have. And so if you're in Maryland, our Virginia season starts way earlier, so you can come down and you can judge in our tournaments to get a sense of it. Sorry, Dave.
No, it's a good plug. Some of them are even very close to the state line.
As my first year coaching was just not the best experience, went and judged and saw what behind the scenes looked like and how things worked, and became a better coach, and my teams have better experiences as a result. You learn how to coach kids, but judging is the best coaches training you can have.
I 100% agree with that statement. That's the best way for a new coach to really understand what's going on, is to judge a tournament and really see what the judges are looking for.
While
you see other teams.
And while you can't judge at a tournament that your team is participating at, you can judge at another tournament. Both states have many tournaments and are always in need of volunteers. So you can do, I know you already give so much time with the teams, but you can give another Saturday and help. It is a wonderful way of figuring out what's happening and see what other teams are doing and there's a big aha moment for the coaches, or having a parent or somebody else involved with your team, a mentor, go and help. That's fine too.
Yeah, I've had lots of coaches over the years tell me that they became a better coach after judging, because they got it more. They had a better understanding of what's happening in the closed room after the teams walk out the door and how the decisions are made. And I think for some of them it was a new appreciation for the amount of thought and mental wrangling and debate and spirited debate, and like the amount of time that the judges really put into trying to get it as right as they can. And I've on the flip side, I've never had a coach tell me that it wasn't beneficial. So.
And not only just coaches, but parents and mentors also coming out. You will definitely be able to help your team a lot better and really understand the program once you've done it. So you don't have to just dump everything on the coach. The parents and the mentors, I try to get my parents out to a few of them as well, especially ones that I'm not working at. And so that they can really get an understanding when they come to the meetings what I'm trying to accomplish as a coach.
Okay, the next question is tips for interviews, and I believe what they mean is tips on how to get prepared for that judging and talking to the judges. Scott, you want to talk on that a little bit?
So I think the key thing is come up with the mechanism for your team so you don't have team members over talking each other. So if one person's taking the question, don't have 5 people fighting to take the question. As Dave's already said, you don't have time for every team member to answer every question. So kind of have people have roles in rooms kind of works best, because they know what their expertise is, and say, you know, as this question comes up, who's the best person on the team to fill that? And is a key thing. And just don't over talk each other, and don't have one person answer all the questions. And when team members get nervous, you tend to have 1 or 2 team members who will dominate the conversation. So the easiest way is just videotape them doing that, and they'll see themselves doing it, and as a team, they'll self-correct on that.
Yeah, I think not everybody can answer every question is a really good point. We see some teams that they want to demonstrate how inclusive they are. A team of 10 students, and 8 of them will try to answer the question when they don't necessarily have anything to add on to what's already been said. And in a way that actually ends up hurting the team in the sense that it gives the judges less time to ask additional questions because your 10 minutes is your 10 minutes.
I would also say practice. Before you go in for the interview, call in a couple of the parents that haven't really been part of the meetings up until that point, and have them ask the questions off the rubrics. That gives the kids answering to adults that they don't know that well. It gets over a little bit of the nervous part. And I always make sure my girls had plenty of donuts before we walk into core values, because they are definitely sugar rush. It definitely helps.
Okay. Dave, the policy for, I know it's not a question, but what's the policy for coaches or adults going into the judging session in Maryland? How many are allowed?
Most of our qualifiers are 2 adults. Some are only 1. It really depends on the size of the venue and how big the rooms are, but most of them are 2 adults. It can be any adult. It could be coach. It could be parent. It could be a adult high school student who's helping out as a coach on the team. And we always allow videotaping and photo taking inside the room, so you have the opportunity. A lot of our teams take advantage of especially videotaping. It gives an opportunity for the coaches or parents who didn't get an opportunity to go into the room to see how the team did, or for you to take a look at that after the fact and learn what went well and what didn't go well, that maybe you didn't even notice when you were standing in the room in the moment watching.
And Scott, the policy for Maryland, DC?
For Virginia, DC, you don't have to send any adults in the room. So let's start with there. So we have a lot of teams that go in with no adults. And that's a good precedent. We allow 3 non-team members, very similar to Maryland. It can be a historian, 2 parents, people, team parents can rotate out, or it could be someone who's mentoring the team.
Great. The next question we already addressed, how accurate are the rubrics that are handed out to the teams? I'm going to pop down because the last one says, how are the rubrics delivered to the teams beforehand? As we said, you get those on the website, firstinspires.org. The rubrics are available. They don't really change much over the years. The questions or the way they do it is the same, the sections and all. At the end of a tournament, how does Maryland give those rubrics back to the teams, Dave?
So for us, we always give them back the same day of the event, right after the award ceremony. I always remind my coaches I will only hand a rubric to a coach, especially at my larger tournaments, like our state championship event where we have 80 teams. I will always try to skim through some of the comments that are written on the sheet. I always encourage my judges to use constructive criticism. Some of my judges are better at the constructive piece of constructive criticism than others. So I always ask my coaches to help me by screening those comments and deciding what you do or do not want to share with the teams before you make the choice to share it with your students.
And Scott, for Virginia, DC?
Same policy.
Right. Next question. How should we prepare the kids for core values session? Mm-hmm. Any advice from maybe a coach, someone who's coach? How do you get your teams ready for that?
A couple different ways. I'll start with this actually. So one is, there's plenty of little teamwork activities that are out there. I think it's useful to pick a couple and have the team kind of run them. We're pretty much always going to ask them to do some sort of teamwork activity. And it's an opportunity just in general to see how they approach a problem that they haven't seen before, the 3 minutes they have with which to accomplish the task. And then the second, I go back to the rubrics. Spend some time with the students thinking about what those terms really mean. We talk about things like gracious professionalism and all. And the purpose here is not who can give me the best memorized definition of gracious professionalism, but what we're really looking for are which teams can take that concept and apply it to some behavior they've exhibited in the past and be able to relate that story when the question comes up in the judging room.
Right. Understanding what the core values are, you'd be surprised how many teams have couldn't even name one. And then the second half of the question is, what are they and how have you used them during this season? And the season is fairly long. Even Virginia, it's still a 3-month season. And so how did you take those core values and incorporate them into everything you guys do? And so learning that is the best way to prepare for core values, is understanding what's on the rubric, understanding what the core values are, and let the kids tell the story. And that's the biggest problem I have with the kids, because when you get to the competition part, they completely forgot what you guys did in August and September. And that's why I get a bunch of photos that I took throughout the year, and we go through them, and then I explain, okay, which core values are we demonstrating here? And so that way they're able to, oh yeah, we did go there. That's right. And we talked to so-and-so. And so that they've done it. They just don't know they've done it until you walk them through it a little bit.
Yeah, I think I want to add also from the kind of coaching perspective, as we still have a team, and actually Heather is the coach and I'm the adult mentor, and I more kind of play the judging role. And there was 2 specific things that we saw is a factor for the team to have a good core value. Is that the first is that every meeting that we start with the core value and start with the instant challenge that we designed, and let the team play, and remind them the result is not important. Is how they treat each other if something falls, and how they help each other. And also, do they have a role? Like if somebody have to take care of the time, and somebody have to get everybody together to do the things specified in the instant challenge. So they have to use the instant challenge as a way to build up the team. And the other thing I think is that it's not just about the remember what the Greece is professionalism, but they gave a specific example, and then they will compare with the last week's example to see which one is more telling the story about they really understood the gracious professionalism and apply to the real lives.
Right. So we have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to take 2 questions that are on there and kind of combine them. They want to know, for the project, does the solution to the problem have to be solved, or can it just be an idea? And are judges looking for practical solutions or big futuristic ideas that may be testable?
I think you go to the rubric again. I hate to keep doing that, but did they identify a solution? I mean, did they identify their problem? How much did they study their problem? It can be a big futuristic idea of how you're going to do it, but did they really identify the problem? And then does their solution fix the problem? Did they talk to experts in the field about their solution on whether what are the obstacles in actually making this happen? Is it something new? Have they already thought about it and have they thrown it away? I mean, I remember one team during Trash Track, which was coming up with new ways of recycling. And a team came up with the idea that there's a lot of this waste. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put it in a rocket and we're going to shoot it at the sun. And so identifying, okay, well, then did you talk to people? How much would this rocket cost? How much weight are we talking about? How much stuff are you going to go away? And if they hadn't even thought about that and they just came up with an idea that morning, it's really easy for the judges also to figure out that the team said, oh yeah, we have to do a project. And it was like last week, the week before the competition, because they've been working on the robot the entire time. And so what work did the team do for their project? We don't care if it actually is testable or not, or if it's a practical or a big futuristic idea, but did they really study the problem, and then they really study their solution and all the things that are required for their solution to become a reality. It doesn't have to be a reality today.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it doesn't have to be a fully implemented solution, but the top teams will have done a lot of the groundwork towards understanding the space and be able to present a solution that they've done some background work on to demonstrate that there's a path to feasibility.
Scott, how do the judges determine the Champions Award?
There's actually a formula for that. So it's basically, we take your team's ranking for each room along with your robot ranking. We add those scores up, and the team with the lowest score is your first place champion. The team next is their second place champion. And then we work our way down individual awards in no particular order.
And would you all agree that one session is not any harder to judge than the other? They're all pretty equal?
Depends on which judge you ask.
Yes, I will say judges tend to do what they enjoy, and some judges like core values. They prefer not to do the robot design and so on and so on. So judges kind of pick what seems to be close to their heart, or what they really enjoy about the program. But
yeah, I think I would add that I think maybe where the question comes from is that often people think the core value is hard to judge. That like what is a good team? How do you? It's so subjective. But I think the experience is that like if you judge the core value sessions, then you would know it's very obvious which team is on the top, and all the rubrics will play. And so, so I think that is one lesson that I learned as a judge to improve our team's core value performance.
I'd like to add too, with the core values, it comes out in all judging. I, as a judge, saw a team who came in for project, and it was very obvious that children were not working well together and not having the gracious professionalism and showing the core values that I'd like to see. So is it true, Scott and Dave, that judges who may not be focusing on core values can give feedback for really great core values they've seen, and at the same time core values where they kind of question, and that could come out to those judges?
Yeah, they absolutely can. And I think the other thing with that too is that a really poor core values team could sometimes hide a really successful robot design or project. Because, you know, put yourself in the role of a judge, and you're trying to pay attention to what's happening, and then like constantly there's 3 children trying to speak at the same time, and so what you really hear is like the third word that every other child said. So it becomes really hard to understand what happened, and we do see that sometimes where our weaker core values teams might sometimes underperform in some of the other judging sessions as well, because they're not capable of articulating what they've done.
And
I've been
I actually had. Go ahead.
I've been in judging rooms where core values and other rooms have impacted their judging stuff, where judges would fight not for a team to win an award because they didn't feel they demonstrated core values. So I think core values throughout every judging session is a critical piece, and also from parents and from teams and from coaches.
And those will be reflected. Usually those poor core values teams, it isn't just a one-off. All their judging sessions are, I mean, the judges will figure out when we all get together that, oh yeah, that team. I had a team that actually, I was doing robot design, and 2 kids started having a fight over who wanted to press go on the robot, and it devolved into a fist fight. And then they were like leaving the room, and I said, where are you guys going next? Oh, core values. And I never even talked to the core values judges, but they came out in last place in core values also.
And remember, core values come out in the pits and at the tables for official matches. The referees are kind of keeping their eyes out on core values as well. So it kind of goes on throughout the whole day.
The best thing a coach can do during a competition is don't touch the robot and the computer. Don't even look like you're trying to program, because that is generally the core values flag that we see the most. It's not the kids, it's the coaches that are trying to fix that one problem, and they jump in and they just can't help themselves on the practice tables with the computer, shoving the kid away and programming them themselves.
Thank you. Well, we are at 7:35. We're at the end of our session. Heather and Dawi, is there any final things you want to say to close this up and let our participants know what if they need to review this or where they can find the recording?
Yeah. I think first of all, I think we have just put into the chat box, there's an evaluation form, and that is very useful. This is the very beginning of our experiments to use this virtual format to connect the first community together, and then the recording will be out at the if you search Alma Robotics, like you go to YouTube, put Alma Robotics, you'll find the channel, and then we can send Heather will send the link to remind people as well. And lastly, I think I want to thank all the judge advisors and Dana to spend times. And I cannot remember for the 7 years I'm involved with FLL, I can see like all the wonderful judge advisor like sitting in one room, like it's virtual room to talk to each other and share their wisdoms. I think that's it's a wonderful wonderful event that can bring people together. So so thank you for all the panelists.
Thank you, and good night, everyone.